So yesterday in class, we started working with the concept of value using acrylic paint. And we did a value scale with separate boxes and then a value scale using that blending technique that's so important for us to learn how to do when we're working with acrylic. And then we did the 4 basic shapes. Looking back on this work, it's important for me to kind of self-evaluate. The goal for us is to be able to create what we call a range of value. So paint that goes from light to dark sort of evenly without big jumps or gaps. And then the other thing we need to be able to do is create the illusion of 3-dimensional space on a flat surface. So my shapes shouldn't feel furry or hairy, and they shouldn't feel flat. They should feel as 3-dimensional as possible. We are going to continue to work with values in preparation for the painting that we're going to do together. We're going to be making a painting of, we're going to be doing an animal. So we're going to be doing something with fur or something with feathers. And so as practice, we're going to be creating some texture in acrylic paint because if we think about furry animals, they have a lot of texture. And so we need to learn some techniques to create that texture. And so that's what this next practice sheet is about. So I'm going to be using my paint. And one thing to think about is when we're working with acrylic paint, we do sometimes have to work in layers. So, or come back and add another layer over the top. So when I'm creating this, I want to make sure that I'm getting the values accurate. So I can take a little tiny corner of paint and I can see that the fur that's there is a little bit darker than just white. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix up a really light version. And I'm just going to tap it on there. And that's definitely closer to the gray that's there. But I'm also going to need a darker color. So there are a couple of different ways that I can do this. I can use a little bit darker color along with the lighter color right in my paintbrush. But a lot of times what happens is you'll have to come back and kind of adjust those values. So I'm going to use, see, and I've got this way too dark right now. I'll have to come back and I'll have to fix it. So in this upper corner, I can see that the texture of the fur is kind of smoother and it gets chunkier as it goes down this other direction. So I'm kind of thinking about like putting an undercoat on here, but I'm also kind of using my brush strokes to mimic the direction that this fur grows. So I'm going to grab some lighter paint now and lighten up. Some of these sections. You can see I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my paintbrush and I'm looking really carefully at the texture that's here. And I'm just, like I said, just kind of trying to replicate that as close as I can. And right now it's an early layer. So I'm going to have to think about coming back and adding, so you can see as I add some lighter color over the top, I'm getting some more of that gappy feel that fur has. It's kind of a lighter chunky part here. So this is going to take a little bit of practice. And as I move this direction, there's definitely some darker areas, right? So I can add those in now so that they can dry a little bit, and then I can come back over the top with some lighter paint. Thinking about how I'm using my brush, right? So I'm going to turn my paintbrush to the side because all of this fur goes this way. So I'm trying to do some blending on my sheet. And again, I can kind of match. And there's kind of a light dark effect that's here. And I might have to, should just kind of work in layers and back and forth to get these, your black and white versions, to look as close as you can to the version that's here on the paper. Recognizing that sometimes that does mean you will end up having to let it dry, and you'll have to come back over the top with just some extra like detail piece. So you can see as I'm adding this next layer here, that's getting a little bit more depth to this kind of shaggy fur that's on this image. So these dark patches here. So I'm looking for the shapes. I'm looking for the direction that the hair is going and growing, and I'm always painting in that direction. So it's me kind of thinking about how can I use my paintbrush to replicate the direction and the fur that's there. As you can see, I'm looking back and forth, waiting for some of those layers to dry again, and just kind of continuing to replicate this as best I can, paying attention to my brush strokes and how that affects this overall furry feeling. If I need like a blurry effect, using a clean dry paintbrush is a good trick. Like I can put some paint down first, and I can come back with a clean dry paintbrush, and I can blend, so I can blend or soften that together. So if I clean my paintbrush out here, so it's kind of chunky right now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean my paintbrush out, and I'm just gonna kind of blend this using a clean dry paintbrush. And you can see that what that does is it kind of pulls and softens some of those harder shapes that I have. So I don't actually have, and the only paint on my paintbrush right now is just paint that I'm lifting up from the surface of my wet painting at this point. You're gonna go ahead and do this for all of the fur and feather textures that are here, using just one color and black and white. You don't have to make them all the same color. You can adjust and use different colors as you desire. Making sure that you're paying attention to the details and the direction of the fur. And this will give us good practice for the painting that we're going to start talking about in class tomorrow.